We've got a lot to get into here on the show. Is it okay to talk about tanking? Robert Saleh calling out Breece Hall. What the hey? And how the hell are we going to fix this New York Jets roster? We'll play a little GM. Let's roll.
Zoinks! It is unequivocally the Super Bowl for New York Jet fans.
Field Yates, baby. Field Gash Yates. Let's bring him on the show.
Come on, people. Connor Rodgers is joining the show. What's up, Connor? But Trevor Gash Sycamore, baby, for me, personally, my favorite New York Jet of all time.
Wow, it's great to be on. What an intro that was right there.
Paul, nobody does an intro like you, man.
Paul, you give the best intro of literally any podcast that I've ever been.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas.
Good morning, everybody. Paul Eston Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. We're streaming live right now in 3 different places here for Boy Green Daily. Heavy on Jets Facebook page, 40,000 New York Jet fans. YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoyGreen25, and on Twitter as well, @BoyGreen25. Appreciate the support. You guys can also listen to the audio-only version wherever you find your podcast at Boy Green Daily. Let's bring him in. The man, the myth, the legend, Jake Asman, Mr. 35,000 subs. Oh, my. From I think he wrote it in his tweet, in his post, that it went from a hobby to a full-time job. Congratulations to Jake Asman. It's Jasmine without the J. Let's bring him in. Jake Asman, baby. Jake, yes.
What's up, Paul?
Wow, Jake Asman. So what is it now? So once you get, it's kind of like, you have if anyone knows, like that rich uncle billionaire or something, like what do you get that person for Christmas when they have everything? So 35,000 subs. What now? Now that you've accomplished all there is in life, do you just die now? Like, do you just ascend to the heavens? What's left? What's left?
I thought when I would hit 35K, it'd be because I'd be covering a winning team this season. So
yeah.
Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, but you know this, Paul. Jet fans are the best. They're loyal. They're passionate. There's always something to talk about, even when they're bad, like this year. So, just love this fan base, man. It's an honor to talk about this team with these fans every day.
All right, let's get into it. First off, I want to get into this Breece Hall thing. Now, a lot of people may have seen this over the weekend because Robert Saleh, instead of having a video call with the media, he had a audio conference call. So I was able to get the audio yesterday and tweet it out. And we won't play it here on the show. The clip is a little too long. But a couple of the quotes, Saleh kind of went out of his way to kind of single out Breece Hall. He called him a special talent, and when the ball's in his hands, everything's better, but he needs those grimy yards. A back has to understand that's what he needs to get. That means lowering your shoulder, getting dirty, getting grimy, finishing runs, and not trying to find ways to bounce. He's a big back. He's 220 pounds. He's got elite speed, but he also has elite ability to lower his shoulder and get vertical. From what I've understood from talking to players, and Jake, you've had the same great pleasure and more so, probably one of the worst insults you could give a player is like calling out like his manhood and toughness and getting that. That seemed kind of weird for Saleh to call out one of his best and younger players who obviously has been struggling running the football, but I think it's more than just Breece Hall is the issue here.
Yeah, I wonder if Saleh, is doing this as a way to basically try and like motivate Breece Hall because he knows he can handle it. Like, he's so protective of like Zach Wilson, for example. He would never say something quote unquote negative about Zach publicly because Zach confidence wise, there's a thought, well, he wouldn't be able to handle it. Breece clearly can handle it. He's their best offensive player, either him or Garrett Wilson. So I feel like maybe that's part of why he said what he said, kind of challenged Breece Hall. And it's like, oh, if he could call out Breece Hall, we all got to do better if Breece is being challenged. And the way Breece handled it on Twitter, where he came out and basically said, I don't know why people are freaking out. Constructive criticism is good. Maybe Saleh and Breece were in lockstep on something like this, it's kind of using as motivation for the rest of the team. And then you heard the comments from Lakin Tomlinson yesterday that Saleh basically challenged the entire team to be better. So, I mean, it feels like Saleh still has, a strong grasp of this locker room. You lose to the Falcons and you're 4-8, and I know technically we feel like they're done for the playoffs, but they would be at 4-8. It would all be, all but be assured. I kind of feel like this is like maybe like the last grasp of like, hey, we need to go on a run right now, and this is my last chance to try and get this team to do it. So I wonder if the Breece comments, then with the context clues about the challenge to the rest of the team, that came out yesterday. That's all kind of part of this, like, let's rally around beating the Falcons and get back in the mix type of thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because again, Breece handled it like a pro on social media. But man, I don't know if I was in that locker room and he refused to say anything bad about Zach Wilson at the podium, and then basically at his next opportunity, going out of his way on a question that wasn't really even asking that, he's like, "Hey, let me get something off my chest here." If I'm in that locker room, I'm like, seems like we're kind of having a moving field goal post. It could rub some people the wrong way. So I'm not trying to cause drama and issues where there isn't, but that might bother me if I was in that locker room as another guy saying, that doesn't make sense. If someone's playing like shit, just call them out for playing like crap. And I get, different players handle things differently, but it's different in the NFL when you're on such a public platform.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think those comments truly matter. Honestly, like, it's a story, and I think it's magnified because of the fact they played Friday, because of the fact there's not another game until the following Sunday. But I don't know if we're going to be talking about those comments, within the next couple of days. I think they will kind of pass by, and there'll be more things to complain about and be upset about, because ultimately, like, Breece Hall, I think, knows he could be better, while at the same time, the Jets would probably have at least 2 less wins right now if Breece Hall didn't exist. So let's not forget that too, Robert Saleh. Your offense stinks, and it's already historically bad. I can't even imagine how much worse it would be if Breece Hall, let's say, was injured or was not a Jet right now.
Although I saw the tweets, I don't know if you saw this over the weekend, Jake. So after Breece Hall has his game, right? So that was Friday. So over the last 6 games or something, he's averaging 2.6 yards per rush. He has like 70 attempts for like 180 yards. And then a few people were tweeting out, is it time to have the Breece Hall conversation? Like, hey, maybe he isn't as good as we were saying. And I just went, wow, this is where we've gone on Jets Twitter.
I mean, you have people coming after Breece. I've been dealing with just morons in my comment section saying Garrett Wilson's actually not that good. He's not a great receiver. What evidence do you have that he's great? And I'm just like, I can't. There's so many things wrong with this team. We don't need to go down the Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson rabbit hole. It's exhausting, man. And then, like, this is what happens when you lose, though. Like, these type of conversations pop up. The questions about everything pops up when you're 4-7. So it's a shame, man. A year ago at this time, they were 7-4. Maybe a little reverse time of year this year. Maybe the Jets win out instead of losing out, because last year they were 7-4. They lost out. I'm going to manifest a 6-game winning streak, Boy Green. How about that?
Juicy. After a 6-game losing streak last year, I will take it. Yes, sir. Which, speaking of all this, the possibility does exist, whether it's likely or not, that the Jets technically have a path to the playoffs. Hell, they're 4-7, but in the NFC, 4-7 teams are still in the hunt graphic there in the playoffs. So technically, it is possible. So I ask you this because it caused a stir on social media. I think it was since the Falcons loss, I've been saying, hey, or maybe it was the loss before that. Yeah, it may have been the Bills, but Tankathon update. Here we are, Jet fans, and here, if this happens, this happens, this happens. A quick Tankathon update. I've had a lot of fans in the mention saying, hey, Paul, what the hell, man? No tank talk, no draft talk. We don't want any of that. Is it wrong for Jet fans to peek into the Tankathon or draft stuff? Or should they, again, to your point, this optimism and everything else, and forget all that stuff? Let's just focus on this, and we'll get to the draft when the offseason comes. What's your take on that?
Well, look, I'm going to root for them to win every single game, because I think this coaching staff needs wins, right? I think this locker room needs wins. And I think, I just feel bad for the defense. Like, I want to see their efforts be rewarded in wins. Like, they have been good enough for this team to win double digits with competent offense. So I'm still rooting for wins. I'm not a Jet fan who is rooting for losses like I was in 2020, when it was clear that franchise was fundamentally broken and they needed to lose and get the top pick and move on from Gase, etc. This is not that. So I'm rooting for wins. The way I think you approach it as a fan is you root for wins, but if they lose, in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, we lost. At least we're benefiting from a better draft pick, right? Like, it's like the consolation prize for losing. But I'm going into every game until they're actually eliminated from the playoffs, rooting for them to win, because I know it seems impossible for them to obviously win a game right now. They did win 3 straight games earlier in the year, and in the back of my mind, Aaron Rodgers coming back, if they're 7-7, all of a sudden the season's alive. So, do I think it's going to happen? No. I think I have a better chance of dating Margot Robbie than the Jets do of winning the next 3 games. But that all being said, I'm still rooting for wins. Even if they win 2 of the next 3, I think that's a positive for this locker room, this coaching staff. So root for wins, and then at the same time, you're allowed to check tankathon.com when they lose to see what happened.
Yeah, rationalization is basically what I do. Rooting for wins, phenomenal. When they lose, I'm like, well, hey,
Right.
not bad. Always trying to see the glass half full, regardless of the situation. Again, we're speaking with Jake Gash Asman, baby, here on Boy Green Daily. 35,000 Gash subs. Cheers to the next 70,000, baby. That is spectacular. Let's make that full-time job even more fuller. Get another pull at the Jake Asman residence if we can. That'd be spectacular. So, guys, make sure you guys hop on over there. I'm going to give you 3 names, Jake. You tell me if they're all safe, if they're all gone, or if only some are safe and some are gone. General Manager Joe Douglas, Head Coach Robert Saleh, Offensive Coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. Safe? Fired? Some? None? Let me know.
On Tuesday, November 28th, they're safe. I think if the Jets lost out, meaning they finished the year on a 10-game losing streak, after they finished last year, at least Saleh and Douglas, on a 6-game losing streak, I think there's a more likely than not scenario they're out. You know what I mean? That's why I think they got to win some games here. I don't think both guys could survive a 4-13 season when they were 4-3. I just don't see it. So I think they got to win at least 2 games here down the stretch to definitely be back. And look, we could debate whether or not they should be back. I think if Aaron Rodgers didn't exist in an alternate universe, if they were 4-7, I think we'd be looking at cleaning house and starting over. But Aaron Rodgers got hurt on the first drive of the year. And I know a lot of fans don't want to hear it, but there's context that needs to be applied to the record and what has happened this year. And my big thing with Saleh is this. If you're going to fire him, why does Douglas get to pick another coach? To me, if you're assigning blame for why the Jets are an unmitigated disaster at 4-7, it's because the general manager completely neglected ever getting a competent backup when it was beyond obvious that was what needed to be done the second Aaron Rodgers went down. So I don't think Saleh is Vince Lombardi, but I also don't think he's this terrible coach. I look at Zack Taylor. I think I saw the graphic. He's 4-28-1 without Joe Burrow. I don't hear Bengals fans saying he should be fired. I covered the Texans for 5 years when I lived in Houston. D'Amico Ryans. The only difference between him and Robert Saleh is one guy had his franchise draft Zach Wilson second overall. The other guy had his franchise draft C.J. Stroud second overall. So I just don't think there's enough there to fire Saleh, blow the whole thing up when the defense is great, and that's because of him. They play hard on both sides of the ball. He's held the locker room together. If they lose 10 in a row, he loses the locker room. It's a different conversation. But here on Tuesday, November 28th, I think Saleh's back. I think Hackett's back because of Rodgers. And I think Douglas is back too, because I don't think the Jets are going to make the mistake of you fire the GM and then you keep the coaching staff. They made that mistake a decade ago with Rex, Tannenbaum, and Izek. So I think right now all 3 are back, if that makes sense.
It certainly does. And I do want to say I agree with you. The head coach GM thing for a long time, they were not on the same timeline. We have this constant flux of, well, this guy needs to be fired. This guy keeps passing the baton. I think if they fire him, you got to just wipe the slate clean. I think they are attached to the hip. Let me ask you this, Jake. You prognosticate on what you believe is going to happen. Do you want them back? All 3 of those guys I mentioned.
Yeah, because I just look at it like this. Like, what's the path for the Jets to win in 2024? Like, to actually win, make the playoffs, have a chance to win a Super Bowl. I think their best path to do it is essentially give the guys that are in charge a mulligan and say, you're surviving because of one guy. And that one guy got hurt on the first drive of the year. But no matter what, it is you win the division or go make the playoffs and win at least a game. Otherwise, we're making changes. Like, we're giving you the mulligan, but we need you guys to win and win big. Otherwise, you're out. I think that's still their best path to, having a great season in 2024. I know some people are going to say, well, you blow the whole thing up, and if Rodgers doesn't want it, who cares? I don't subscribe to that. You built the entire thing around him. I can't, in my mind as a Jet fan, have this what if of like, what if they ran it back with Rodgers and they actually went for it? Because did you feel terrible about this team on September 10th? I think 99% of Jet fans felt pretty good about this roster, pretty good about the Jets' chances of at least being a playoff team this year. I don't want to throw the whole thing away when they bring back the entire defense minus Bryce Huff, who they should be able to re-sign. And I think the only positive of this year, Paul, it kind of exposed all the weaknesses. You know you need multiple receivers next to Garrett Wilson. You know you need multiple offensive linemen and better offensive line depth that don't have an injury history. Like, you know that. So if you dump all your resources into the offensive side of the ball and you bring back Huff on defense and run back the same defense, that's a top 5 defense And that's an offense that with Aaron Rodgers and a Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew as backup could still be in the playoffs next year. So I don't love blowing the whole thing up when I still think there's a window for this team to be very good next year if they do the things I just mentioned.
Jake Asman, what is the Jets quarterback room in 2024?
Man, I'll tell you what, Paul, to quote you, I'll make sweet and passionate love to my wife if they're able to have a quarterback room. I'm not married, by the way, so this would be in the future. So this would be Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
I'll say Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew, one of those, like a high-end backup. If you got to overpay, fine, whatever. And I would say, a developmental quarterback that they could take maybe on day 2 if they trade up into the second round, which is not impossible for that to happen. They have resources. You see it all the time. Or a day 3 developmental quarterback. So I'll use Jordan Travis from Florida State as an example. Like someone that you could bring in. He's not going to play at all. He's going to truly learn behind Aaron Rodgers. So once again, Rodgers, high-end backup. I'll say Jacoby Brissett. And then, Jordan Travis or someone of that ilk that could be QB3, developmental guy that sits there and learns. And you start thinking about the future of that room by trying to win in the immediate, but also being prepared for the long-term future without Aaron Rodgers when he retires or whatever happens.
All right, let's pair that up with this. What are the top 3 needs on the Jets right now if you had to currently rank them?
Top 3 needs?
Yes,
offensive line,
receiver,
backup quarterback. I think those 3.
All right, and going draft-wise, it seems like it's been heading in this direction. The 2020 NFL draft, the Jets people were debating offensive tackle, wide receiver, like the CeeDee Lamb, who I loved that year, or what if one of the top 4 at the time offensive tackles were still on the board. Is that the same conversation this year? And if so, which way do you lean if you're the New York Jets and you have one of those picks in the top 10?
Look, I think it depends on which players are there where you're selecting, right? I mean, if Marvin I think they need to go O-line over receiver in the draft. But if Marvin Harrison Jr. is somehow there, depending on where the Jets are, then I think you take him because he's a generational player. Now, I don't think the Jets are going to be in range to get him, but I'll just use him as an example. I think it all depends on the prospect that's available to you where you're picking. Now, I think in a vacuum, if I'm like designing the perfect offseason, I think you add a Devontae Adams, Mike Evans type in free agency, and you use your first-round pick on a tackle, and then you use your third-round pick maybe on a quarterback or a receiver, and you just go all offense in the draft. Like I think that to me is the more practical strategy. But if the Jets sign some linemen in free agency, they brought back Becton, they signed someone else, etc., and there's a receiver they love. Let's say it's not Marvin Harrison Jr., but it's, Malik Neighbors, this stud from LSU who they love in the top 10. All right, look, the Jets need to get it right. And I know people are down on Joe Douglas, but he has proven he can draft. So you're just going to have to put blind faith that he could have another great draft because this team is going to need to hit on a lot of free agents and nail their draft to truly be a contender in 2024.
All right, let's have the Aaron Rodgers conversation. So obviously, as you've kind of highlighted earlier, if the Jets are in the conversation to go on a mini winning streak here, then it's obvious that he could be there and they can maybe go on a run for the playoffs. So is that the only scenario you're cool with him coming back? Like, let's say they lose the next couple here, Falcons and blah, 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 blah. Now all of a sudden they're eliminated from playoff contention, but Aaron Rodgers still wants to come back for number 1, to prove that he can come back. And 2, I read the Peter King piece, if you guys haven't checked that out on Monday, just about for his teammates, that this whole season was about him. That he almost owes his teammates to show him like, hey, here's the little glimpse of everybody can't wait for 2024. So are you okay in that scenario, or is that off limits to you? How do you evaluate it?
I think in a perfect world, he doesn't play if they're out of it, but doesn't it kind of feel like no matter what, this is going to happen?
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
so
it does.
The fan of me is like, you know what? If this guy wants to play, F it. Let's go. Like that's like the fan in me. I guess the way I look at it is this. If he what's the worst case scenario, right? He gets hurt and it somehow affects next year. What's the injury where he would get hurt now and he'd miss all of next year? Like ACL, obviously, but if he ruptured his Achilles again, even if it was like a conservative timeline, he'd be ready for training camp. Like that's in the back of my mind when I'm trying to tell myself. Now, it'd be another devastating injury to the same injury he just had. How does that affect him when he does come back? / would he want to go through the rehab again? I don't know. I think the Jets need to have a conversation with him and be like, worst case scenario, you get hurt. Then what? Are you coming back? Because we owe you $40 million guaranteed. What then? I don't know. It's scary to envision him going out there, but it's going to happen. So you might as well just embrace it and go, you know what? he wants to play. F it. Let's see what it looks like, and let's just let it rip and let the chips fall where they may. I know that's irresponsible. It doesn't make any sense. But the Jet fan of me has been just beaten down with just inept quarterback play for a decade. If this guy wants to go out there and play and he's somehow healthy, who am I to sit here and say, nope, I don't want to watch Aaron Rodgers? So I think it's silly. I don't think he probably should play, but I'm going to fully embrace it because what do we have to lose?
That's exactly what I think. Because we embrace it. Let's just rally. Week whatever it is, 17 Cleveland Browns Thursday night. Let's go.
Joe Flacco. He'll be playing by then for the Browns. It'll be Flacco versus Rodgers. Crazy.
Wow, who would have thought? Former Super Bowl MVPs facing off, huh?
That's right.
Where are we? All right, Jake. Let's end on this. You have the Falcons logo above your head. We'll get even deeper into it as we go through the week here. What's your prediction? Obviously, injuries and things can always change, so I always give that caveat to anyone who's given the prediction this early in the week. But Jets Falcons, what do you think? What are we expecting here? Tim Boyle, start number 2.
I actually have a weird feeling that this is the type of game the Jets would win. Like, I don't think they're going to lose out. So I'm like, What game are they going to win? And I guess you could say, well, if Rodgers comes back, they can win one of the last 3 when 2 of those games are the Commanders and Patriots. But I have a weird feeling about this week. They're getting a couple of offensive linemen back. I think the Falcons coming in off a win is a good thing. I just don't think they're very good. I mean, they're 5-6 in the worst division I've ever seen. I watched a lot of their game against the Saints. This could be like a 9-6 ugly type of. It could be the game we saw last night on Monday Night Football, like that type of grotesque, ugly game. I think the Jets could win this one, though. I mean, the key is going to be, can they limit Bijan Robinson? If they could keep him in check, I expect the defense to play well, and it's just going to be a question of, with the Jets getting some offensive linemen back, can Breece have a big game? Can Garrett have a big game? And can they win an ugly one? 13-10. That's kind of what I could see happening here. I have a weird feeling the Jets win like a gross, ugly game, but we're going to say a win is a win. And half the fan base is going to be like, oh, wait a second. If they could somehow beat Houston and then Rodgers, woo. But this is, to me, the type of game the Jets would win. So I'm going to be optimistic, if you will, this morning. I'll say the Jets win 10-9 or something gross 13-10 type of thing.
We are a sick fan base. We lose, we're like, boy, top 5 pick. We win. Whoa, hold on a minute, Aaron Rodgers. And then we could get a little crazy. All right, Jake, set us up. What's coming on the Jake Asman show this week? What do you got?
It should be a lot of fun. We always got something cooking up on the channel in a little while, so this will be 10:30 Eastern for those watching live right now. Antoine Staley, who covers the team for the Daily News, going to come on the show. We'll get his perspective on everything going on. We'll have a weekly segment with Nick Faria from AM New York tomorrow. We got Jeff Parles on Friday. We did an excellent film breakdown with Andrew Fialco yesterday. He basically just exposed just how inept the Jets' offensive scheme is when you compare it to a modern NFL offense like the Miami Dolphins. So that was certainly an enlightening but painful show to do. So if you're a Jet fan, each and every day we got content up on the channel, so check it out. It should be a lot of fun.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in for Boy Green Daily. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 7:30. Jake.